I think it's one of the greatest Hollywood comedies of all time. Bringing Up Baby. Here's why I think this movie is great. Why I totally recommend watching this many times. Coming up next. Bringing Up Baby to me is a true test for movie lovers. Now, I know not everybody's going to love every movie, but it's manic, it's crazy, it's very funny, it's very well done. This is Howard Hawks, the director. I think at his best, he did a wide range of films, but this is probably his ultimate screwball comedy, although he's got a couple of others. The movie was released in 1938, just missing that magical year, one of everybody's favorite years, 1939. I think if this would have been in 1939, it's in the top 4 or 5, at least for me, if not probably higher, because I really, really love this movie. Starring Cary Grant as a paleontologist. He's playing the character of David Huxley, who's sort of stuck up, snobby. He's going to get married, and then he runs into and mates character played wonderfully by Katharine Hepburn.
Hey! What do you think you're doing?
I'm trying to unpark my car. Oh, hello.
This is my car.
Oh, good. Then would you mind moving it out of the way?
She is Susan Vance, who is passively going after the David Huxley character, even though he's engaged to be married. She doesn't know that, of course, at first. He plays sort of a stuck-up, straight character, and then she plays the comedic, eccentric character who gets him in all sorts of trouble. This is a great screen duo, a great screen contrast. You get the straight character, Cary Grant, acting perturbed. He often ends the scenes with some kind of perturbed line that's often very funny.
Susan, when a man is wrestling a leopard in the middle of a pond, he's in no position to run.
The baby of the title is, of course, the tame leopard baby, who gets into all kinds of shenanigans, and David Huxley falls into a lot of problems. For one thing, he's a paleontologist. He's going to get the final bone in his brontosaurus skeleton, and then he gets the bone, but the bone is taken from him, and he loses it, and he's got to go find it. The other part of this movie, of course, is that baby gets lost in the middle of the movie, and there's a dog and the leopard, and this movie is just manic and hilarious. In fact, I think this plays well for very young children who will find the animals, the heavy use of animals in this movie, and then some of the lighthearted chase sequences. It does actually play kind of like a Looney Tunes cartoon, or the cartoons of the day. I think it's sort of modeled on that. This is point in movie history where they're speeding up the action and the line delivery of movies, which I think makes things feel more modern. And I personally find this to be kind of like the manic animated movies from the last several years, which exhaust me like the Lego movie. And as this movie goes along, it gets more and more absurd. That might annoy some people, but I really find this to be great. This movie can be enjoyed for straightforward screwball comedy and rom-com plot, which I find to be great. But there's a lot of depth to this movie, and I tell you, there's a lot of analysis in academia, different forms of scholarship, different isms looking at this movie through their own lens or prism, and finding all kinds of interesting things in this movie. You can go dig around on Google Scholar and put Bringing Up Baby in. You're going to find all kinds of weird interpretations of this movie. I'll offer you one of them. This movie is actually about reproduction in marriage, and the idea that psychiatry doesn't have all the answers, like very common topic in Hollywood movies of this period of time when psychiatry and psychology seem to be dominating and categorizing people, reducing them to the narrow categories, and anybody outside those categories is labeled as crazy or, worthy of, say, going to an asylum or something like that. You get a number of characters in movies like Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, and then something like Harvey, which James Stewart is in, where crazy people actually are normal or help people out. That's the case with Susan Vance in this movie. She is doing things that are, one, against the law, two, against norms or conventions, all over the place. She's very eccentric, and yet she is helping ground David Huxley in some fun new reality that he has never known before. When I say this movie is about reproduction, think about this. David Huxley's fiancée at the beginning of the movie says, "We're not going to have children. This will be your children," and she points to the brontosaurus skeleton, which is old, dried up. That's going to be their child, which is nothing. They're going to be barren, according to her.
Nothing must interfere with your work.
Oh.
Our marriage must entail no domestic entanglements of any kind.
You mean?
I mean of any kind, David.
Oh, well, Alice, I was sort of hoping, well, you mean children and all that sort of thing?
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
This will be our child.
So what's sterile? It's this fiancé, and what's generative, performative, and going to produce all kinds of great new things? It's Susan Vance. And that's not just in terms of babies, but also, of course, of scenes, events, and new adventures in David Huxley's life.
I mean, if I were engaged to you, I wouldn't mind waiting at all. I'd wait forever.
Yes,
I hate to say this, maybe this will gross you out, but the reproductive metaphor is all over the place, including the bone that David Huxley loses. He's always looking for a bone in order to, well, it's an erect, phallic-looking thing. There's a lot of that imagery in the movie, and hollowed out, let's say, female and anatomical parts in this movie, like the butterfly net, for example, that Susan Vance uses. What I'm saying is that these two characters are getting together, and there's hidden sexual metaphors in this movie.
When are you going to marry him? What's his name?
It's, Bone.
Bones? What a
One
ridiculous name. Well, one bone or two bones. It's a ridiculous name.
Susan Vance steals the bone. She hides the bone. She takes his clothes in the movie, and there's a little, like a risque shower scene in the movie. He needs to find the bone to complete his child, which is the skeleton, of course. And then, there's all kinds of fascinating places you could go with this movie in terms of the metaphors and these two characters. It's a romantic couple needing to get together. I say all that because the movie does actually have one of the first lines in terms of homosexuality, where the Grant character talks about going gay.
These aren't my clothes.
Well, where are your clothes?
I've lost my clothes.
Well, why are you wearing these clothes?
Because I just went gay all of a sudden.
That's often read as him being effeminate or maybe hinting at his homosexuality, but I'm also arguing this movie is about him needing a legitimate wife who's going to give him children, and different kinds of children, legitimate biological children, not just sterile skeletons of brontosaurus or dinosaurs, the old thing. Susan is going to produce something new and grand and great for him. And that's why you have the ending where, I won't want to spoil it, but you know what happens at the very, very end. Guess what Susan does? She's a bringer of chaos. She's the force of chaos into his life, but a good kind of chaos, where he sees an orderly person trying to get $1 million to keep his institution going, trying to get the last bone to put in his skeleton. He's ordering everything in his life, and it's thrown into complete chaos by her, but that's good. This sort of yin and yang, order, chaos, obviously male, female, coming together in this movie. And then, of course, there are the leopards. You have the tame leopard, and then you have the wild leopard, and only one of those is a good kind of leopard. I think the animals are likened a little bit to the characters, the tame leopard being Susan, who's wild, out of control, seemingly, but really she's tame at heart. And the dog is kind of like, maybe, like David and Susan together, taking the bone, stealing the bone, burying the bone, bringing it back. And then the leopard and the dog learn to play together. They're two things that you wouldn't expect to go together, but do. Obviously, that's David and Susan as well in this film.
Look, David, they like each other.
Yes, but goodness knows how long that's going to last.
I think the movie takes a run at psychiatry as a profession because David is a scientist, he's logical, and then he becomes completely illogical. He looks irrational in the movie. He has his own logic in this movie, trying to get the bone, but people don't understand him. Obviously, he's in women's clothing at one point in the movie. And so then the scientist, completely disordered, completely made irrational, but that's the point of the movie. That's what Susan Vance is getting him to do, which makes him complete, as it were. That's only a tiny, tiny bit of analysis, and there's a lot of different directions you can go, but really this movie at its heart, if you just want to watch it for this purpose, is entertaining. I think I watched it with my kids. They loved it. They were cackling the whole time, and they couldn't predict the plot. I had teenagers who said, we have no idea how this is going to end. I think that's the feeling of the movie. It's very rare to have a comedy that feels like you don't know where it's going to end up exactly, and it's just fun to go along for the ride. All in all, this movie is completely fresh. I wonder if it's universal. I think it might be. It's lasted for 80 years. That's a great sign. It may last further. It's like a work by Oscar Wilde, whose work is going, actually written by a guy named Wilde. So, yes, this work could keep going for another 80 to 100 years, and I think it just might. What do you think about Bringing Up Baby? Why do you think it's great? Let us know in the comments, and please subscribe to this channel for more great content. Have a great day.